Hello guys, I feel like today's video is going to be one of those mixed energy kind of videos where I'm super hyper to begin with and then I just slowly start to deteriorate and fade because I watched so many movies over the last like quarter of the year. So this is my July, August and September movie wrap up, and as I say, I watched a lot of stuff. I don't know what got into me. There was something that just sparked that I just felt like I needed to sit and digest content, you know. So that is exactly what I did. Let's kick it off with July. So the first thing I watched was, and you're gonna see the sequels pop up here and there, but it was Fear Street Part 1 1994, which I gave a 3.5 stars. So the concept of this one is that after a series of brutal slayings, a teenager and her friends band together to fight an evil force in the place that they reside called Howdee-haie. This was giving me those sort of Riverdale vibes, but that soon turned into American Horror Story with the intro kind of aesthetic of it. And then just when I thought it was like own thing, you know, its own kind of spin on that 90s slasher horror, it felt more like, again, something that I remembered and enjoyed, which was scary stories to tell in the dark. And as well as that, Stranger Things. And pretty much every other film and movie and TV show like that. I didn't know anyone's names in terms of characters, and the guy friend in that, if you've seen it, was so freaking weird. The love interest, she wasn't worth all the aggro, to be honest. And she as an actress kind of gave me Disney vibes. Like, I love Disney, but that's not what I wanted from this movie. However, with all that being said, this was very enjoyable. I had so much fun watching this, and as you'll see later, I definitely did want to go and check out parts 2 and 3, which I did, as I was very entertained, very enthralled and excited for what was to come next. And actually, I wasn't surprised. I went rooting and tooting. I wasn't surprised to find out that the director of this movie is married to one of the co-directors of Stranger Things. It really had that vibe, and even the mall I felt like was the same mall, and I think that's why I looked it up, because I was like, that looks very much like Stranger Things. And I know, you know, if they're all published like it's a book, if they're all produced and directed by Netflix like it's its own thing, I'm sure they'll use like the same sets and stuff, but that looked exactly the same. But yeah, and also some of the characters and just the overall feel felt very, very Stranger Things. So it almost felt like she was in her partner's shadow a little bit, or maybe they're just generally into the same kind of vibe. Makes sense. Anyway, 3.5 stars. It was a lot of fun. After that, I saw a new release. Well, the other one was a new release, but this one was a new release to the movies, and this I gave it 5 stars, and that was Black Widow. This was amazing. So it's set just after Civil War, but also with some flashbacks to set Natasha's origin story, which is basically what this is. So we got this kind of epic storyline to finish the Black Widow as a program once and for all, and that was kind of the concept and the storyline for how it ran. I love that in the introduction they used scenes to really kind of place the story without cutting into the actual movie time, if you know what I mean. Like with the credits going on and just getting into the feel of the movie, it gave you what you needed to know background without wasting time of the actual runtime, if you know what I mean. It was raw, it was emotional, super effective. Random note possibly, but I do love when movies have like little snippets of current modern day songs playing. It just makes it feel more real and like of the time, do you know what I mean? So almost you feel a bit more relatable to what's happening. It doesn't, I know it's a superhero movie, but I feel like they usually do quite realistic superhero movies, right? So it feels like it places you as a viewer and like, yeah, this could be happening right now, you know. It just kind of grounds it a little bit, makes it feel more real. I adored the relationship between Natasha and her found family, and enjoyed her sister's, Yelena I think she was called, part in it as a whole. I didn't like Midsummer, so it was nice to be able to really fully appreciate her acting skills in something that I found to be quite awesome, which was this movie, Black Widow. As well as being completely emotional and truly epic, it was so funny. I absolutely loved Alexi's character, and oh my god, just the stuff he came out with, adored it. The fight scenes were beautifully shot, especially the final battle that saw some kind of like in the air fighting. I thought that was really cool to watch. That was, yeah, it was super tremendous. This is going to sound really stupid, but I never realised that Black Widow was a program like super soldiers. Like, I don't even know. I just thought it was like a super sketchy kind of institute situation. I never thought about it much deeper than that, really. And yeah, I just thought the title of Black Widow was unique to Natasha. But anyway, now I can fully say, with, you know, especially now knowing her background properly and the story and what the Black Widow kind of situation is, I can definitely wholeheartedly say Natasha is my favourite character. I loved her anyway to begin with, and I thought she was my favourite character, but now knowing more, I can appreciate her more as a individualised character, I guess. Yeah, especially in her standalone movie, she really carried it. Also, now I can't stop giggling at her hero pose. I just, wow, I really see it. If you know, you know. Anyway, this was such an awesome movie, and I was so excited by the end credit scenes. Next up, back to the Fear Street franchise. I watched part 2, 1978, and I gave this one 3 stars. So in this one, we're following a killer that's on a murder spree, terrorising Camp Nightwing. It's a little bit of like descending back in time, but they're all interconnected stories. So yeah, there was such a Nancy character, you know, Nancy from Stranger Things, and it felt a bit too much to be its own, and that's where I felt like, wow, it really is very like copy and paste a little bit of Stranger Things, I felt. Dina's eyes at the end really made me laugh. That was just, yeah, a bit random, but I couldn't not say that. But yeah, this was very entertaining, much like its first movie. I did watch it in 2 halves though, just because I was super tired. So it wasn't like I wasn't enjoying it or anything like that. But yeah, I just thought I'd mention that, because sometimes I find that watching it in different times kind of affects my viewing overall. But yeah, it was a good slasher horror again. That was very thrilling. It was cool to go back in time to give a bit more backstory to this whole predicament that they were in the first movie, as well as meet some more characters. I think I definitely enjoyed part 1 more than this one, but then as I was watching, I thought that part 3 definitely looked right up my street with the vibe that I got from it, or the vibe that the advertisement was giving me. So I think this one, although it did have purpose, getting to the end goal and, you know, seeing more story build up generally, it did feel like filler on some level. Next up, I watched Beowulf, which was the 2007 release. I want to say there's like 2 different releases of these, and I gave this 3 stars. So after reading the epic poem for the first time back in July and absolutely loving it, I went to watch the movie to get an idea of just like character designs really, and feel for like the time through a different medium. So there were some parts, I don't know, maybe it being translated from like Anglo-Saxon, there were some parts that I didn't maybe, like I couldn't envision in my mind's eye, so I just wanted to see like a visualization of how other people had interpreted like the monsters in this and the characters, so that I could just kind of focus in on that a little bit more and be like, ah, so that's what he was trying to explain, if you know what I mean. Anyway, the style of this movie is so weird. It looks like CGI gameplay, you know, when they do that, the cutscenes and stuff, it kind of looks like that, which, I mean, admittedly was a bit off-putting for me personally. I think it's because they look real, and then it's jarring where the face and eyes like just lack that human emotion. You know, it's sort of like that cut off to be like, yeah, they're CGI sort of thing, if you know what I mean, or whatever medium they used to create them. I was more interested in seeing how Grendel was designed at first, because as I said, when reading, I thought it was a dragon. Like, I didn't really understand exactly the details of his descriptions that I was like taking in. But then I realised he was really like a mutated human like being thing, but I just couldn't picture it during my time reading the book. So yeah, the depiction of him in the movie was truly truly horrifying. I wasn't expecting that. I can't remember the actor's name, but boy oh boy, that voice and the accent for Beowulf just did not work for me, unfortunately. It was so cockney, like it didn't mesh well. Although this was fun, I found it to be super hypersexualized, and the attempt at being comical almost felt like it was mocking the story. The twist of how Grendel and the dragon was created was so gross, but it was a cool plot twist, I'll give it that. It was super fun. It did deviate some ways in the original concept of the poem, but it focused way too much on aspects that weren't really key, like Grendel's mother. But yeah, I guess it did make for cool visualization. And yeah, it was awesome to see that Neil Gaiman produced it, because I adore his books. Okay, next up I watched The Secret. This one I gave 3 stars, and I've been intrigued to watch this one since I think my form tutor in like year 9. I saw she got gifted the book of this, and the cover really captured my attention. I was like, ooh, what's that? But I was never like super interested enough to actually properly go ahead and pick it up and see what it is about, if you know what I mean. But interested just enough to stick on the documentary when I saw it on Netflix recently. So yeah, basically The Secret is shared by some of the greatest minds in science and philosophy, and went on apparently to give success to Einstein, Da Vinci and the like. The Secret is basically the law of attraction, and this is a concept that I've not had much knowledge on before. Like, I'm aware of the term, but I didn't really understand what it meant, other than, you know, you kind of put out the energy that you want to get back, and that was just like the basic that I understood. But yeah, the actual production of this documentary was so dramatic, and it had this like notion of occult mentality at first, but breaking it down, they were really just discussing the powers that the mind can have if you know how to use it to its full potential. I actually believe it to some extent, you know, what you can do with just sheer willpower. There's been so many things that have come my way when I've just thought about it differently, and as I watched this in halves across a couple of days, the day after watching it I tried it and I noticed immediately that things were working in my favour. I know it sounds really crazy and just kind of silly. I mean, come on, I've got witchy woman vibes. I believe in that sort of stuff. But it's all about your perspective and having a positive outlook on life. Avoiding that dangerous, toxic positivity, because obviously that just goes in the complete opposite direction. I think I would have liked the actual presentation of this better if it discussed the science behind it more, as opposed to the like really cringy examples and the acting out of different scenarios. But you know, it delivered the point, I guess. It was definitely a bit dated to watch though, so it was super cringy, and you know, but what they were talking about was interesting, I would say. Right, so next up I watched Howl's Moving Castle, which I've got a dedicated review on already, because I did a book versus movie joint review where I read the book and talked about the movie and reviewed them, did a bit of comparing and contrasting and that sort of thing. So I will link that in the cards for you if you are interested in checking that video out. I've also got some reading vlogs on the Howl's Moving Castle trilogy. Next up I watched Suicide Squad 2, which I gave 3 stars. I feel like everything's 3 stars. Just like the month that passed, September, my reading was very mediocre, and I'm seeing quite a lot of mediocre ratings for these movies now. But yeah, I gave that one 3 stars. And you know what? I think I'm gonna have to say that I preferred the first movie over this one. Even with Cara Delevingne's awkward, evil belly dancing thing that she did, which was absolutely rubbish, that movie in itself I felt was like a much more fun one. Sure, this was hilarious, but that was kind of about it, and I think it went overkill on the humour too, if you can believe that. There was a few touching scenes that we had. I really liked the Ratcatcher 2 as a character, Flag and Bloodsport as well, but the story itself was just okay for me. Super gory, which I kind of loved, but not much substance at the heart of it other than that. The music was awesome, and there was a particular kind of lullaby-like music that was included that really reminded me of Pan's Labyrinth, and I quite liked that. But yeah, I also liked the really over-the-top comic book style of all the action scenes. That quite gripped me and I enjoyed it. But overall, it was enjoyable, just some kind of surface level fun. It didn't really go any deeper than that for me, unfortunately. Alright, on to what I watched during August. I finished off the Fair Street trilogy with part 3, which was 1666. And this one I gave it 4 stars. So we are thrust back into 1666 and Dina learns the truth about the legendary witch that's been haunting their town called Seraphia. This was fun. I liked seeing where everything really began, and there were twists that I definitely didn't see coming. It was once again super cringy in a lot of aspects, but I loved seeing the backstory and the secret to defeat the curse. And yeah, I hope there are more movies kind of like that, because I looked into it and I didn't realise they were a book series, kind of like Goosebumps. I think it's by the same author, R.L. Stein. Maybe I might be making that up, but if there's more books, maybe there's more story arcs and things like that. That'd be fun to see movieized, whatever the word is. Alright, and then I watched American Psycho for the first time, and I gave this one a 4 stars. So again, never seen this before in my life, so this was the very first viewing, and I didn't realise Christian Bale, William Dafoe and Jared Leto starred in this. I think I would have watched it much sooner had I known that, or realised, I don't know. It gave me kind of like the Truman Show vibes in a way, with the way he put on this kind of weird voice and persona, and it just felt very like, I don't know, like, I want to almost say fourth wall, but not quite, that's not what I mean. Yeah, this movie was so good. I really liked it. It was hilarious, unsettling, eerie, and ultimately left me in a mindfuck. The ending left me really confused, as things became to be revealed as not what I had thought they were, if that makes sense. But it was left kind of too open-ended for me to feel really satisfied by the conclusion. I'm not the biggest fan of like open endings, so I like to be told how it finishes, you know, and kind of have that door firmly closed afterwards. Next up, I watched Ladybird, which unfortunately I gave a 2 out of 5 stars. So despite not really knowing what this was about, I was intrigued to eventually go ahead and check it out, solely because I like Saoirse Ronan. I can't remember if I'm pronouncing her name correctly or not, but Ladybird is basically a coming of age story following a high school senior who expects a lot from life, going through the motions of like a strained mother-daughter relationship, struggling with finances, and of course heartbreaks. There were some beautiful shots, and Saoirse really plays her role well. She's a believable character, I feel, and I do want to know where Ladybird went next, but it was just in execution a bit meh. It definitely felt rushed and choppy, and I just wasn't vibing at all with it. Like, all these random scenes were just spliced together and it didn't make sense and it didn't flow. I just felt like I was missing things. Maybe it's just not for me, but it sucks because I really did want to enjoy it and appreciate it, but it just went over my head. And I hate saying this because what does it even mean? But I almost feel like it was too artsy and intelligent for me, and I didn't care much for it, sadly. It just felt choppy, and I actually went to the point of Googling to see like how long is the runtime, because I felt like I was missing scenes. Like, I watched it on BBC iPlayer and I thought they cut it down and edited it. I don't know why they would, but that's to the extent of my confusion. Then I watched Gosford Park, which I gave a 3 stars. I barely remember watching this actually, but it's coming back to me now. This is a black comedy whodunit movie about a set of wealthy guests and their servants that gather for a weekend away at the grand home of Sir William McCordy, who is soon murdered. What a strange pace of storytelling this had. There was nothing soon about it because the murder didn't happen until like 2/3 of the way into the movie, and there was never a proper reveal to it. It just sort of like peeled off and ended with no consequences and no fallout. It was just done. I didn't watch it all the way through properly, but it did interest me, and I did enjoy seeing a lot of actors I recognised and enjoy the films and TV shows, but this was them in their early days. I was hoping for a more kind of tense, thrilling Agatha Christie kind of vibe, and although it was funny and I love a period drama and just, you know, getting to appreciate the timely pieces in general, homes, fashion, characters, all that sort of thing, it just didn't have me as gripped or had enough going for it to keep the story moving, almost to the point of it being like 2.5 hours of movie time nothing. Alright, so the movie I watched after that was The Matrix, which I gave it 4 stars. This was the first viewing I've ever seen of this film. I think I remember vaguely watching one of them at some point in my life. It must have been on the telly and it was just on and I didn't know what I was watching. I was like a kid, I didn't really know what was going on, so I was just like, I'm gonna read my book or colour in and draw, whatever I was doing. Anyway, I'm really surprised to have enjoyed this so much. I think a lot of stuff still went over my head even now, but the message of fighting against a corrupt system that's lying to the population, I can get on board with that. It was cringy, but in the best way, and incredibly enjoyable. The whole concept is rather uncomfortable, quite scary, yet very thought-provoking. Another new release I checked out was Free Guy, which I gave 5 stars. Oh my god, what a super fun movie this was. I loved all the superhero and game jokes, the gamer YouTuber cameos, and again, another one that gave me the Truman Show vibes. Had this kind of blend of Fortnite versus Sims kind of vibe as well. But yeah, it was amazing. The best kind of cringy, adorable, hilarious, incredibly entertaining. We have 2 connecting plots. We're basically following an NPC who gains sentience. I can't say it's sentient. Yeah, and we have these kind of 2 connecting plots. One of them is trying to get proof that this coding for this game was stolen. Whilst in the game, Guy, who's our main character, our NPC actually, so really in reality he's nothing but a side character. He was becoming aware and forming own thoughts and becoming like a self-sustaining AI kind of thing, and how it worked. I thought it was just a fabulous movie. Very, very heartwarming. I checked out The Witcher, The Nightmare of the Wolf, which I gave 3 stars. I enjoyed this, but I didn't have a decent connection to it, I must say. I really didn't care about the backstory of Vesemir to begin with, so that's probably why. But I watched it just because I generally enjoy The Witcher and I'm excited for the next season. I also thought this possibly might give me a bit more information for that season, so I chucked it on just to be clued in, you know. I'm so glad I've got lemon and ginger tea here because I always forget how much talking about these movies like sores my throat, honestly. You can hear it going all cracking already. Okay, and this brings us to September. So I watched another movie. This one was released on Netflix and it was called Kate, which I gave 3.5 stars. So on a mission of vengeance trekking Tokyo, Kate finds an unlikely companion. This was much better than I was anticipating. Honestly, it was a random watch and I stuck it on after recognising the main actress. But I know from like Birds of Prey and mainly Scott Pilgrim versus the World, the Universe, Scott Pilgrim versus that one, Ramona Flowers. And yeah, I'm glad I did put it on because it was action-packed, emotive and exciting with a decent story tying it all together. I was a bit lost at some points. You can see that's a running theme throughout these movies. Some things just really go over my head, but I loved the overall execution of the movie. It was aesthetically pleasing, had me engaged, and I loved the growing relationship between Katie and Arnie. It was perfect for a Monday night, just what I needed, to be honest. I did feel like it could have ended sooner than it did, quite a few times. I mean, I could feel it was a longer movie than it needed to be. Maybe. This is, I don't know, that's just my opinion. Then I watched a horror called The Descent. And I gave that 3 stars. So the simple synopsis of this one is: after a tragedy, a group of adventure-loving friends decide to go climb a cave that is rather horrifying within. So monsters, jump scares, backstabbing, gory hallucinations. This had it all. Thoroughly entertaining, thoroughly scary. Suffered a bit of feeling like an early 2000s movie though, but I mean that's kind of what it was, so is that really a negative when, you know, that was the thing? Then I finally checked out Raya and the Last Dragon, which I gave 5 stars. This was the one that recently came out on Disney+. This was beautiful. I loved the style of it, the artwork in general. It reminded me of the detail of Moana with the mixed media storytelling at the beginning of it. It was so funny and I loved the heart, no pun intended, of the main story. As soon as Sisu peopleified or personified, became a person, I instantly placed the voice of the actress The character design looked just like her. I think she goes by Awkwafina. Sisu kind of disappointed me when she turned out to be super goofy, but then she was super lovable as well, and that disappointment didn't really last long. I loved the found family in this. It was beautiful to behold, and it had kind of very Ocean's 11 heist vibe. That was everything. I adored it. This was great, so heartwarming, incredibly funny, and just beautiful. So I wanted something witchy and something, I don't know, I was getting into those feelings of autumn and like horror and like Halloween and stuff, so I wanted to kind of live those feelings, and I watched The Old Ways, which I gave a 3.5 stars. So we're following Christina, who after 20 years away goes back to her hometown after being haunted by a traumatic past and re-immerses herself into her culture. She becomes plagued by a demon and learns the old ways of the Bruja. This was really interesting. I love learning about witchcraft, and it's even more interesting when I learn a bit more about other cultures' experiences and traditional ways of healing magic, like especially when they're combined. So that's the part that I most enjoyed when it came to this movie. But I also really liked Christina finding herself, again I guess you would say, or reformulating herself to some extent, and just becoming a better version of her. I will say you may feel lost for the first half, but through the exorcism portion of this, things piece together in order. So just push through it because it is definitely a decent watch. Back to Marvel again with another new release, and that was Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, which I gave 5 stars, of course. This was just fucking epic, honestly. The legend and the culture was vibrant and rich and magical. I couldn't look away from the screen. I was constantly on the edge of my seat, just like bobbing up and down like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I was just so excited. The fight scenes were truly astonishing, and yeah, sometimes I was like, what am I looking at? It's just so fast. But I loved every minute of it, and I can't fault that. I love that we had a lot of older actors as well. Anyway, it was just phenomenal. My cheeks were tingling, my feet were doing the tippy tappy happy dance because I was just so excited, and as I said, I was literally on the edge of my seat. I did feel like I kept forgetting it was Marvel. It felt very much like its own thing, pulling a lot from these traditional Chinese slow-mo fight scenes, and kind of just making it its own. The main thread being about power and grief really wove the story together beautifully, and it gave the characters more of a believable purpose and end goal, and just added to the heart of the plot as well. So yeah, this was really amazing. One of my friends I was discussing it with, I didn't know anything about Shang-Chi before, but apparently they tried to bring in this diverse character back in the 70s or something, and it was just so offensive. So I like how they've reintroduced him and kind of done it right, I think. So yeah, he gets his representation, he gets his story heard properly. I love that. Next up, I saw Beauty and the Beast live at Bristol at the Hippodrome, which I gave a 5 stars. This was amazing. Lighting and projections and the acting, love that our leads were black, and just the whole experience was magical and delightful. I'll tell you what wasn't magical and delightful: the fact that the arena, or whatever you want to call it, the theatre itself, was too damn hot. I was fine until I wasn't. I managed to get right near to the end of the showing, until I passed out and dropped down like a sack of shit. But yeah, not the one. Too hot, needs some aircon, but the actual performance was spectacular. Back to this horror vibe that I was after and was craving, I watched the Candyman, the 1992 version, so the older one. I think the newer one's just come out recently, and I gave this 3.5 stars. I hadn't seen this one before either. So graduate student Helen unintentionally summons the Candyman. I loved the urban myth side of this. Like, it didn't feel scary in the traditional sense, but it also did in some ways. I know that's very contradictory, but that's just kind of sums up my feelings, I guess. There was some mega cringe again. I feel like that's just gonna be the case with older movies, or movies that are done in the style of older ones. Like, that's kind of the heart of it, and I feel like you're gonna enjoy that, just seeing, you know, bringing that forward. But yeah, it was quite a good story. I would have liked a little more background to the original Candyman. Like, we had the basics, but I personally needed more depth. not more death, no more death. I like lore and like folklore and myths and all that sort of thing. So the fact that it was kind of based on this urban legend, I wanted more of that detail, and I feel like it kind of left us hanging a little bit there. But nevertheless, I surprisingly very much enjoyed this and would like to see the new one. And the last movie I watched during the last quarter of the year was The Matrix Reloaded, which I believe was the second movie, and I gave this one a 3 stars. So I felt like I couldn't connect to this one as much, possibly because I ended up watching it in 3 separate sittings and not all the way through, so you know, that distracted viewing probably didn't help, but also because I was once again generally confused by a lot of things, from Zion to Neo, even more overpowered than before, and I just found a lot of the fight sequences specifically really laughable. And I know they had the best that they had at the time, and I'm sure it was impressive then too, but they just looked like sim characters. Like a awkward, badly modded sim fight game thing. Nevertheless, once again, it was entertaining despite much preferring the first movie. So, I know that's probably a bit of sacrilege to say because I know this franchise is much beloved, but those are just my thoughts. Anyway, thank you so much for staying with me for this incredibly long video. Let me know what you've been watching, any recommendations, and I shall catch you in the next one. Bye.